Welcome to this introductory session, recorded lecture, to give you more of a sense of what the Electoral Geography module, GY347, will be about this year, what's involved in it, what's the big ideas, what's the assessment like, and how to do well in this module, or more importantly, how not to do badly in this module. Okay, so this gives an idea of the content, but the basic approach to electoral geography. So ultimately, I'll be looking in the module at different themes within electoral geography. Just to note that this is electoral geography. So it's looking at politics, it's looking at elections, but it's looking at it from a geographical angle. So over the last 10 years or so that I've done this module, 10 or 11 years, I've generally found I've had the module with geography students and political science students. Now, you might think political science students are coming in at an advantage because maybe they have a little bit more political knowledge, but ultimately, political science students need to learn to think geographically. The geography students may need to learn a bit more about politics, but things even out. And by and large, I often find that a number of political science students will do very well in the module, and a number of geography students will do very well in the module, but vice versa, some will struggle. Some political science students would struggle because they just don't make that next step to actually try and think about the geography, the geographical dimensions, and maybe some geography students would struggle. Just to say, basically, just to put everyone's mind at rest, if you work hard in this module, you'll do well in this module. The assessment is set up to reward any little bit of work that you do for this module. So if you're doing work for the module, if you're continuously doing work, getting marks for it, you will be fine on this module, I promise. So some of the themes I'll be looking at: turnout, participation, voting patterns, seats, etc., policies. So some of the ideas I'll be talking about. One of the things I want to get across in this diagram is that everything is linked. Participation flows into voting patterns flows into seat levels, who gets into power, who wins the most seats in Parliament, and ultimately that all flows into something we don't really touch in this module: policy. Underpinning everything is what I'm going to talk about in the first official lecture: electoral systems, the rules of the game. How do you vote in elections? How are votes added up? What are the rules about who wins seats? How many seats are there in the constituency? And ultimately, these electoral systems or electoral rules ultimately determine who gets seats in Parliament and ultimately who holds power in a specific state. Each country has its own electoral rules, electoral systems, but there are two major groups of this. But I'll talk more about this at the next official lecture, which will be on Wednesday, because Monday is set aside for the careers talk with the university's careers department. Underpinning all this is contextual factors, but also underpinning all this is the importance of geography, place, the idea that people vote in different places, that people's political behavior is shaped by the places that they live in. So all throughout this, I'll be looking at political electoral themes, but generally always underpinning the importance of geography, the importance of place, looking at areal differentiation, differences in voting patterns between different places. So it is elections, but it's elections very much through a geographical lens. Okay, so the module, you will have a handout, or if you work in the class on Wednesday, you'll be able to get this handout from Moodle. I'll also have copies of the handout at all the first few lectures anyway. So the module objectives and learning outcomes are listed there. I won't go into this. You can read this yourself. But ultimately, a lot of the objectives are ultimately a lot of things about Basically, a lot of what I was talking about in the previous slide. The module outline, what are the big topics I'm going to cover? Generally, we look at electoral systems. We'll be looking at electoral systems in this module. We'll be looking at electoral boundaries. We'll be looking at candidate selection. We'll be looking at election campaigning. We'll be looking at voting patterns, and we'll be looking at voter turnout. So they're the basic themes. Now, if you've never heard these topics before, don't worry, don't panic. I am coming into this module assuming that everyone has zero knowledge about elections and politics. All I ask is you work through the process and try to learn about these as we work through the module. Recommended readings. There's no specific. If you had me for Approaches Human Geography, there was 2 major textbooks and a number of other important textbooks. There's no real good electoral geography textbook that's going to cover everything. For electoral geography, you'll actually find that articles in academic journals, so academic journal articles, will actually often be a very useful source of information for this. If you did Approaches Human Geography, I didn't give you the academic journal articles for Approaches Human Geography because they're really just too difficult to handle. They get into really high levels of philosophy and theory. The electoral geography articles, or articles related to electoral geography, they're a bit more accessible. Now, some parts you might get into some kind of statistical work or that, but ultimately you should be able to read an article. Maybe you might struggle with the statistics, but you should be able to get the main ideas or the main points from that article. So I'll generally try to recommend more in the way of journal articles for this module. There might be some book chapters where you have a very important book chapter. You might find you can access that on the Moodle page. So if you've checked the Moodle page already, you'll see I'll put up some of what I think are the foundational readings, or kind of the basic important readings for this module, and try, if you can, have a dip into these. Office hours are important for this module. I think office hours are particularly helpful in weeks 3 and 4 and 5 when you're starting to work on the presidential election campaign, and when you might have some concerns or some confusion about what to do. So definitely make use of the office hours during those weeks. If you're not sure what to do, don't just sit there. Call up during the office hours and discuss it with me, and I can give you some pointers on what to do. If you like, you can call up, if you prefer to call up in a group of 2 or 3. So maybe your presidential election campaign mini team of 3 or 4 students. If you want to come up in a group, that's okay with me. But the main thing I'd suggest is do make use of office hours. This is your last semester as an undergraduate student. You're now final year students. You shouldn't be afraid of calling up to us. This is part of the service that's offered to you on this module. There's no tutorials in this module, so the office hours fill the void. They are effectively the tutorials. So if you have got queries, if you're really struggling with an aspect of the module, particularly the presidential election campaign task, don't just kind of sit there saying, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. Call up to me during office hours, ask me questions. Trust me, it will help. Now, the assessment for this module is 2/3 based on continuous assessment and 1/3 based on a 1-hour exam at the end of the module. There'll be 4 questions. You do 1 hour, 4 questions. For the exam, I'll say a lot more about the exam in April or early May when we're getting towards the end of the module. But for the exam, I'll say 2 things on this. First of all, it's 1 question out of 4. You'll have a good choice of questions. I'll actually say 3 things, sorry. Second thing is, because we're losing 3 classes due to bank holidays, due to careers talks, we lost half a class on Wednesday. I won't go into it. I won't say any more about that. um, because we're losing a lot of classes because of bank holidays, etc., there'll also be a lot of classes given over to the presidential election task. So let's see, 22 hours, 22 classes normally. That's 4 gone 18, and there'll be probably about 3 or 4 classes that are related to the presidential election task or parts of the classes. So really, there's only going to be roughly maybe 13 or 14 lectures of content that you have to cover for the exam. So last thing I'll say about the exam is if you do well in continuous assessment, you should be coming into the exam either already having passed the module or being very close to having passed the module, because continuous assessment accounts for 2/3 of the module mark. So here's some mental arithmetic for you. If you get 60% in continuous assessment and all going well, I'll have your provisional final continuous assessment marks ready for you come the start of May before the exam, so you'll know where you stand with this module. So if you're on 60% for continuous assessment, that means you're on 40% already for the module mark, even before you add in any marks you get for the exam. So obviously, if you get 60% in the exam, you'll end up with 60% overall. If you have a bad exam and you say, oh, you flunk, you misread the paper and get 30% in the exam, you'll end up with 50% for the module. You'll still pass the module because you've already got enough marks to pass the module anyway from the continuous assessment. But I think sometimes with exams, one of the main things, problems, issues, is that you feel under pressure coming into the exam. So hopefully with this module, you won't feel under pressure and you can go into the exam saying, okay, I've already got 42% of the module mark secured because I got, say, maybe 65% in continuous assessment. So you know what? Uh, I'm not under pressure here to pass the module. I'm not under pressure here really maybe to get a 2-2. Like, I'm just going to go into this exam and I'll try and do my best and push for, try and do as well as possible and hopefully push for a 2-1 or a high 2-1 even better, if you get what I mean. So, continuous assessment is, I'll be honest, it's real continuous assessment. It's not a case of some of the modules where you've got continuous assessment amounting to one big essay. I'll be honest, a lot of times a big essay that some of you might do the night before it's due. The continuous assessment for this module is continuous assessment. It requires you not to do a lot of work in one specific week, but little bits of work at certain points of the semester. To help you out, I have tried to concertina all the major continuous assessment work between week 3 of the module and roughly week 8 in the module. So the last 4 weeks, apart from the learning journal, you won't have any major continuous assessment work for this module. You can focus on attending the final few lectures, focusing on the exam. But I do know at this time of year, April or May in final year, geography students will be working on finalising their thesis or their GY310B report, and you'll probably have a lot of other continuous assessment deadlines in that last 4 weeks. So to try and help you out, I've tried to avoid putting a lot of continuous assessment work in those last 4 weeks. There is the learning journal, that's roughly about 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 words. It's something you could actually be doing in weeks 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll allow you the chance to do it in those weeks. So, but it's not going to involve too much work, and it doesn't have to be an overtly academic piece of work. Now, most of the marks for this module, for the continuous assessment for this module, goes for what's called the presidential election task. So I think roughly half the marks for the module will be based on this, on the actual election campaign, and the other 16% or so is based on the learning journal. That's how it works out. It's kind of 3/4 of the marks are going for election forum, election campaign work, and the other quarter is based on that roughly 1,200 word learning journal. So report that I'll ask you to do once the presidential election task is over. It's something, as I said already, you could actually be working on in the final few weeks and just get it over and done with, and then you can focus on any big deadlines that are remaining in your other modules, as well of as well as all as well as of course doing the reading for this module and attending all the lectures. Don't forget about this module in April, May. Now, the presidential election task, you get to run your own presidential election campaign. For this campaign, I break you in, first of all, into mini teams, or you'll break yourselves into mini teams. I'm not going to force you into mini teams. So there's two parts to the process, and it's there. The idea is it's to mirror how the American presidential election process takes place. So there's two parts to the American presidential election process. There's what's called the primary election phase, where the Republicans hold a number of elections to help them to select their presidential election candidate, and the Democrats do the same. And then there's the final part of the election, the runoff, where all the presidential election candidates face off against each other. It's mainly about the Republican candidate against the Democrat candidate. In this task, I'm going to ask you to basically run through the same type of election. So you're going to have primary elections and you're going to have a general election. So the primary elections, you're going to be divided into two parties, the Harp Party and the Shamrock Party. And there's going to be the Harp Party primaries, where the Harp Party selects their presidential election candidate. And the Shamrock primaries, where, surprise, surprise, the Shamrock Party selects their presidential election candidate. And the end of the election task, the last few weeks, will be the final election, where the Shamrock Party and their presidential election candidate face off against the Harp Party and their presidential election candidate. And guess what? You know what? I'll throw myself into the mix as well. I'll take on the whole lot of you as well. I'll also contest the election as a third party candidate. I'll explain what they are in the next third party candidates are in the next few lectures. Now, we're going to base this election in Ireland for a number of reasons. Obviously, we know Ireland better than America, but American politics has got crazy. And there's certain things that, if I was being realistic, there's certain things you could do in American elections that really are things that students should not be doing. I won't go into the nitty gritty of it, but a few years ago, I used to do this as an American elections task, and a few years ago, I just decided I'm going to move it to Ireland. So we'll be using American presidential election rules, but the election contest will be based on Ireland. We'll have primary elections in Leitrim, Longford, Louth, Limerick, and most important of all, Laois, and then a few other counties less important than Laois. We'll have primary elections, and then we'll have the general election. For the primary elections, you will be divided into the Harp Party or the Shamrock Party at the Monday class in week 3. What's that date? Oh God, I should be remembering these dates now. Sorry, guys. I think it's the 16th of February. So the first Monday class in week 3, I will divide you into teams. I was planning to do that in the previous class, but I'm just realizing there's not enough time for you to get your heads around this that early. So I moved things forward a few days, or back, forward a few days. So on the Monday, I will divide everyone into two parties, either the Harp Party or the Shamrock Party. If you want to form a mini team, and you know the students you want to form a mini team with in advance, then by all means form a mini team in advance. But the main thing is to let me know that you've formed a mini team. Why is that important? Because that means when I'm dividing the class into the Harp Party or the Shamrock Party, if I know there's 3 students in the mini team or 4 students in the mini team, then I can make sure all of you are in the Harp Party or all of you are in the Shamrock Party. Okay? Why do I suggest you get into mini teams for this task, the first part of the task? And it's not because it's a group, I'm giving group marks. As you'll see later on, I'm very much against group marks because there's problems with group marks. And it is final year. It should be your work equals your own mark. But getting into mini teams can be good because you can bounce ideas off each other. It also means that all of you don't have to be the presidential election candidate. So a mini team will involve a potential presidential election candidate plus their supporters or helpers. So you're all playing roles, but one of you can be the candidate. The other 2 or 3 members of that team can be the supporters. And if you look at the presidential election handbook, every candidate will have a list of 3 different potential supporters. So one of you can choose to be the candidate, one of you can choose to be any of those other 3 characters. So you are going to be playing a role. And I think it's better to play a role in this task because it's easier to have an argument with someone called Mary Murphy or Mickey Murphy than have an argument with someone's one of your had the argument with another student in class. So when you're attacking people's arguments or ideas on the forum, you're attacking Mary Murphy and not Dara or Jessica or Nathan or Neve or any other member of the class. It's not you 2 students fighting with each other. It's your characters fighting with each other. What's the transferable skills I think you're going to pick up from this? How to think strategically, how to make decisions using data. So thinking strategically, okay, we have 2 days left on this task. How are we going to make use of our efforts? How will we work together? Where should we be campaigning? Should we be campaigning in Dunleary Rathdown, where the Harps are 70% ahead? Here's the spoiler alert, don't do that. Should we be campaigning in Donegal, where the Shamrocks are 70% ahead? Spoiler alert, don't do that. Or should we be campaigning in Mayo, where there's only 1 or 2% between the 2 parties? Spoiler alert, yes, yes, yes. So you're going to have, if you're doing this well, you're going to be getting into strategic thinking, making decisions in the heat of an election battle. And you're going to be, as you're working through this, you may change your mind. So you might say, oh, in the first week of the general election campaign, we're going to focus on Cork County because it seems to be very close. And then maybe in the last few days of the campaign, you say, actually, we've done so well in Cork County. I think we're almost certain to win Cork County now. So maybe I need to move to somewhere else that's a lot closer in terms of the opinion polls. Maybe Mayo or Laois. Everyone should move to Laois or Dublin City or something like that. Ultimately, you learn different ways. If you write an essay, you learn how to summarize ideas, blah, 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 blah. In this module, you're going to learn by doing. What's the best way to learn about campaigning? Write an essay on campaigning or actually go out and do campaigning. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to actually be campaigning in the real world. You're going to be campaigning in what I like to call a simulated electoral environment, or really, to be honest, let's be honest, it's a make up election. But I like to call it a simulated electoral environment. Now, I won't throw too much jargon at you in this module, and I promise that's the last bit of jargon I'm going to throw at you. You're going to learn about, as you work through this, hopefully, political communication, the importance of offering different messages to different groups of people. So you're going to talk differently, obviously, to older people than to younger people. You'll talk differently to farmers than you will to middle class suburbanites or to working class people. You're going to talk differently and highlight different issues in different areas. There's no point talking about high-rise flats in Leitrim. There's no point in talking about farming and farmers' issues in Dublin. You've got to know what people in different areas are interested in, what they want to hear from you, and definitely learn what they don't want to hear from you. There was a classic example a few years ago when a really hard-working student was campaigning in Meath. Now, they were from Dublin City. They didn't know a lot about rural Ireland. And they go in and say, look, they kind of went down the hard left-wing line. We're going to close down all the large farms. We'll take the land off the large farmers. If you say that in Meath, it's electoral. It's the end of the game. And I basically said, look, you've just lost that county for yourself because you can't say that. Meath is a county of large farmers. You could just imagine if a candidate said that. You'd obviously lose the large farmer vote immediately, but most other rural people would say, oh, hang on, I don't like this. And maybe people in the local town say, Yeah, you're going to take close to large farms, but who's going to buy goods in our shops? So it's about knowing the areas as well. So there is going to be a lot of geographical knowledge and awareness is going to be very important here. It's you don't get to learn about Ireland too much as you work through a university degree. We're more into the big ideas, blah 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 blah. But this is a module where it actually pays to find out some nitty gritty details about places in Ireland, even places in Ireland you've never visited. And the wonders of the internet means you can actually bypass a lot of the work there. You can actually find this information on the internet, but you actually have to go and find this information on the internet. So if you're campaigning in Burren, County Offaly, uh, what's the issues there? What are people interested in? What's the town like? What places might you be visiting or passing through on the campaign? What cafes or restaurants might you decide to visit and have a cup of tea because you want to be real, you want to be authentic. You want to show people in Borough County Offaly that you like the same things that they like, even if you don't. But you've got to show that. You've got to show you're relatable, you're authentic, and you've taken time to engage with the area. Don't come in and just read off a blah blah blah. Here's my message. I don't give a stuff about you. Goodbye. I'm off to the next place. So try to relate your messages to different groups and different areas. But to do that, you need to do some background research. I don't mean lots of hours and hours of background research. I mean, maybe 20 minutes going on the internet saying, okay, Borough County Offaly, what can I find out about Borough? Uh, how can I bring this into my campaign post? What's the local newspapers in this area? Because you might like to say, I was talking, who are the local journalists? Just show you've done this background in research. And I'll be looking at the post and say, oh, you've actually worked out that Will Faulkner is uh, uh, is a journalist on Midlands Radio. Well done, you. You've actually worked out what the different shows are on Midlands Radio. Well done, you. You also learn some valuable life skills because politics and elections is a lot like life. You go through the primary election campaign. You might be up against a rival candidate in the Heart Party, and during the campaign, you'll argue and disagree, and you'll say, "Oh, there, your ideas are terrible. Mine are much better." But then what happens when they become the candidate? They win the election, they become the presidential election candidate, and they decide, okay, you finish second, I need to have you as my vice presidential candidate. That's where you get slightly hypocritical, slightly, but it's life. It's what happens in life. So someone you've been backstabbing all along now becomes your best friend forever. And they're no longer this guy who's got very mistaken views on the economy. They're now a great person, a very authentic person, a very relatable person with very exciting ideas on how to move Ireland forward. Now, there is a teamwork element to the presidential elections task, but every mark you earn, by and large, will be earned based on your own work. So, for instance, when you're going through the primary election, if you're in a team of three, you all have to be This is important. Sometimes people get confused in this. Everyone must be posting. The candidate is posting as themselves. The other members of the team are posting in support of that candidate. And sometimes it's easier to post in support of the candidate because you can boast about the candidate. This is Ireland. This isn't America. This isn't Donald Trump. An election candidate comes out in Ireland and says, I'm the best thing ever. I'm so intelligent. I'm so great. It doesn't work in Ireland. Now, obviously, the candidate can't come out and say, I'm totally useless. Why would you? They've got to make a case for themselves, but they can't get totally boastful or totally start bragging about themselves because it doesn't work in Ireland. But that's what the supporters can do. The supporters can boast the hell about how great their candidate is. Oh, Mary, she's brilliant. I've seen her with groups of people. I've seen her on the campaign. It just reminded me today on the campaign, seeing how she was talking with people in Portlaoise, looking at her in the Laois shopping centre, just meeting people, how authentic she is, how relatable she is, how she's interested in people's opinions, and how she takes on their views. So the team members can boast about the candidate. They can do that. So they offer a different perspective on the campaign. So everyone should post. The candidate posts as themselves, the team members post in support of the candidate. Every time you post, that gets you marks. So every bit of work you do for this module gets you marks. I might do a few in-class exercises during the module. It's going to be different. For those of you who did approaches to human geography, it'll be different to approaches to human geography. The in-class exercises, you don't have to do at least 4 of these. It's different. The in-class exercise will basically be top-up marks. They'll be added to whatever marks you get for the campaign forum. So there's another chance to earn extra marks. So every bit of work you do for this module gets you marks. If you send an email to remind the lecturer that actually class is at 3, not 4, you'll get extra marks. Neve. So everything you do gets you extra marks. But all the posting also will earn your candidate extra votes. Really good posts gets your candidate even more votes. So the more you post, the more you campaign in an area, surprise, surprise, the more votes your candidate gets. And the better their chances is then of winning the primary election, or the better your party's chances are of winning the presidential election at the end. So more posting, more votes. But when you get to the latter stages, it's about strategic campaigning. So definitely in the last week or so, you want to be getting those campaign posts in the counties where it matters, not in the counties where you know the Harps have already won, or you know the Shamrocks have already won, or maybe Adrian Kavanagh's candidate who's burning the whole place down, where Adrian Kavanagh's already guaranteed to win that county. So every post will earn you marks, you yourself marks. It will earn your candidate or your team or your party votes. And simply, the rough way I calculate the marks for the campaign forum work, it's the number of posts multiplied by the quality of the posts. So there's 2 ways to do this. Two ways to get to say 60%. To get 60% on this part of the module, you can do 4 pretty good campaign posts a week. So 4 posts that earn you roughly 15 marks. Or maybe 3 very good posts during the week. Maybe I'm doing my mental arithmetic. 3 posts that get you 20 marks. Or a lot of shorter posts that don't get you as many marks, but because you're doing more of them, it all adds up. Okay, so there's a lot more about the presidential election task in the materials on other materials on the Moodle page, so definitely do check those out. The one thing I will say about this is don't be scared by this. It will be hard to get into for a lot of you in the first week or 2 weeks, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. The final mark will be based on what you do over the 5 or 6 weeks of the presidential election task, not what you do in the first week. So if you have a bad first week, but then do brilliantly in weeks, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th weeks, you'll probably get a first. You'll almost certainly get a first if you're doing brilliantly. So you can have a bad first week. You can have a bad first 2 weeks. But if you get up and running in the last few weeks and you kind of compensate for that, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Where you won't be fine is where you have a bad week 1 and week 2 and you do nothing about it and you just say, oh, I'm doing terrible, I give up. If you give up, then what can if you give up, if you don't do any campaign forum posts, then what can we do? If there's no work I can mark, I can only give you 0. So you need to be doing work. But if you work hard on this, you're going to make mistakes. Don't be panicking about, there will be mistakes made. But don't worry about this. You learn through mistakes. So the trick to this presidential election task is work consistently. Try to get at least 1 or 2 posts done in the first week when it's like riding a bike. Once you get your first campaign forum post done, you're started. You've got into the groove. If you're struggling with the first campaign forum post, as I said already, call up to me during my office hours and I'll give you some ideas on what you can write in it, how to go about it. I will give you examples of campaign forum posts. They're already up in Moodle, former campaign forum posts. So you'll see there's different ways you can do this. You can do it as a diary. Look, today we visited Tullamore in County Offaly. Tullamore is a pretty big town, a lot of serious issues here, but it's got a lot going for it. Or you can do it as a newspaper article. Presidential election candidate Barty Barty visits Dundalk, and then write about what happened. Or you can do it as a radio interview. So there's a lot of different things you can do. If you want to do a few short posts, you can just do, if you've got, and I wouldn't say don't overdo this, but you can do one or two, say, social media posts, or Instagram posts, Twitter posts, etc. The main thing really with this is just make sure everything you do is your own work. Don't use AI. Don't use AI or plagiarism to get your content. Like, what's the bloody point anyway? What's the point going through university and getting a computer to do this? Because the skills you'll get from this task are hopefully the skills that will help you in a bloody world dominated by bloody AI. You're going to be doing things that computers won't be able to do. You're going to be using your imagination. You'll be thinking. You'll be thinking for yourself. You'll be making decisions. So go with the flow. Work through the process. If your work is a bit messy, I'm not going to get upset about that. If there's a few spelling mistakes, I don't care. If the expression isn't great, guess what? Politicians' expressions aren't great either. That's okay. This is not a task that I want to see academic writing in, because that's not the way people talk. That's not the way people relate to real people. So no AI, and there's no bloody need for AI. No AI definitely to generate content. If I see people doing that, it's zero for the module straight away, for this part of the module straight away. It's cheating. Don't use AI to improve your expression. There's no need to. If there's a few grammar mistakes, expression mistakes, so what? That's the way politicians talk. And don't plagiarize. Do look up, say, speeches on the internet that might give you ideas of things that you might cover in the campaign post, but don't cut and paste that speech. That's cheating. It's not your own work. So no cheating. If you work hard, if you're doing 4 or 5 pretty good posts each week, you will do very well on this part of the module. It's guaranteed. So how to do well in this module, and I think this applies to some other modules as well. I don't expect anyone to have a lot of information, or indeed any information about politics and elections coming into this module. All I ask you to do is work hard, go with the process. Attend as many of the class sessions as you can. Now, this is a recorded lecture. Barring another bloody broken body part disaster this year or this semester, this will be the only recorded lecture in this module. So attend as many class sessions as possible and engage with the session. Don't just turn up, sit there, look at your phone. Guess what, guys? We can see you bloody looking at your phone. We know you're not paying attention. Don't sit there and, worst of all, talk with your neighbours. A, you're not listening to what's being said, and B, you're bloody putting me off trying to do the lecture. So I'd prefer, if you're not going to engage, just sit there. But what's the point in turning up for a lecture? What's the point in not doing anything in the lecture, just sitting there? You won't remember what's covered in the lecture. How can you? Especially if you're not really listening. So turn up for the lectures, listen to the lectures, take notes during the lectures. There are lecture slides, but they're not going to cover everything. They're only the bullet points. So take notes during the lectures. Keep up with the work. So this is very important for the election campaign forum work. You may have a bad week where you don't do anything. It might be the first week, it might be the fourth week, it might be even the last week. But try to keep up, try as much as possible over those 5 or 6 weeks of the election campaign to get as many, keep consistently doing campaign forum posts, because every time, every forum post you do earns you marks. Make use of my office hours. I've talked about this already. They're there for you to use. Definitely, if you're struggling with the presidential election task, you should make use of my office hours. If you're struggling with the presidential election task and you don't make use of them, and then you get 10% or less for it, then sorry, the offer of help was there. So yeah, make use of office hours. Keep up with current affairs. Keep an eye on what's happening. The big issue at the moment that is covered in international news is there's a lot of talk about gerrymandering, changing election boundaries in the USA. I'll say more about this later on in the module, but that's a current topic. There's been a lot of elections taking place in the last that have taken place in the last year and a half or so. So definitely around the middle or the end of 2024 and the start of 2025. There's elections taking place all over the place, including Ireland. So keep an eye on what happened in those elections. I want you to think critically in this module. So don't go for the easy argument. Don't go down the line of, oh, the usual boring claptrap you hear. Oh, all politicians are useless. They're not. All politicians are the same. They're not. All politicians from this party are useless, or all politicians from this party are useless. Generally, you'll tend to find there's some good politicians in the party and some useless ones, and the same applies to all parties. So I'm going to be politically neutral on this module and try. You may come into this module with maybe you're more of a left-wing person or a right-wing person, but try to park that. Try to think critically. Try to be open to look at different sides of the debate. And hopefully that means you'll be able to approach politics in a more rational manner after finishing the module. Exam revision, exam preparation, how to write exams, exam techniques. It's important to have good exam techniques. I'll talk about those towards the end of the module. As I said, at the end of April, probably in the second last week of the term, I'll have a standalone exam preparation session, which also means, excuse me, it also means that's one less formal lecture that has to be covered. So yeah, the knock-on effect of this is there's not going to be a big amount of material that you've got to cover for the exam. What is it now? You're talking about really standard 12 or 13 at most, or 14 at most, standalone lectures of module content that you need to cover for the exam. And there's 4 questions. And I'm not going to try and pull the wool over your eyes in terms of the questions. So yeah, don't be worried about the exam. The last thing is try to have fun with the module. There's no other module in final year geography, or I suspect in most other subjects, where you actually get to use your imagination, where you get to play a character, play a different role, where you, for the first time ever, might get to actually say, you know what, I'm a 20-year-old female student, but I am now playing a 79-year-old county councillor from the west of Cork. I'm playing someone totally different from me. Have fun with this. Try and get into the character, get into the role. Have a few spats. So if you want to have a few spats, it's easier to do in the second part, where all the Hart party against the Shamrock party, and you're going to be in the primaries, a few minor spats, but you don't want to burn the house down in terms of getting into a total row with another Hart party member, and then you're the candidate. But the students who were on the other team are miffed because you were a bit too harsh to them, and they don't really roll behind you in the presidential election. Now, you might want to have a spat in the primaries. To help you out having a spat in the primaries, I'll be playing primary election candidates as well. I have to kill them off at some stage because I don't want to be your candidates. But if you want to have a proper spat in the primary elections, have a bit of fun there, you can have a go at my candidates. I'll cry quietly in the office, but there won't be any knock-on effects of having to carry on into the general election campaign process with people who had a big blazing row with in the primary elections. But yeah, have fun with this. You can do things in this module that you can't do in other modules. Expectations of the class. So with this module, how we relate together is going to be very important. How I relate with you, how you relate with me, but also because there's a teamwork component, how you relate with each other. I was hoping to have a chat about this in class, but sometimes you have a chat and it's radio silence. So what's my expectations? Some expectations, I'll talk about what you might expect of me. I think what you should expect of me is to turn up in time. I've already failed in that expectation, but hopefully I won't do that again this year. I don't usually do it, honestly. Um, you'll expect me to give you feedback. Just say in the campaign forum posts, because there's so many of them, I won't be writing feedback on the post, but I'll give you a mark and you can work out from the campaign. I'll give you a marking scheme so you can work out from the marking scheme what level I see your post at. But if you've done a few posts and you want a sense of, okay, how can I make these posts better? You can, of course, call up to me during office hours and I'll gently point you in certain directions. And get marks back to you as soon as I can. So they might be your expectations. My expectations of the class: try to turn up for as many classes as you can. Now, obviously, you might get sick some days. There might be life issues happening. That's fair enough. But try to turn up to as many sessions as you can, and engage with the sessions. Don't just turn up, pull out your phone, and look at the phone throughout the class. I'll bloody well see you doing that. And in the back of my mind, you'll be that student who, oh, that student never listened to what I said during the lectures. They're on the phone the whole time. So, surprise, surprise, they're not doing well in the exam. So, don't do that. Don't be chatting with your neighbour. Some lecturers don't mind this. I bloody well do mind it. For some strange reason, it just puts me off. So, yeah, kind of try to listen. Like, it's kind of basic life skills anyway. Like, if someone's talking to you, you're not going to suddenly turn away from them and talk to someone else. So treat a lecture like that. Um, don't be afraid to ask questions. You might think, God, this is a stupid question. Trust me, stupid questions, stupid questions are usually not stupid questions. It might seem stupid, but usually it's not. Usually it's something, and sometimes it might. Uh, yeah, basically, don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. You can ask questions during the class. If you have a very quick question you want to ask me, you can ask me at the end of a class. I think bloody four, I've still four in my mind. The 3 o'clock Wednesday class, I don't think there's a class immediately after that. So that's probably not a bad time to be, if you want to have a quick word with me after a class. But obviously, if you've more detailed questions or just want to talk about the module in general, or want some guidance on the presidential election task, make use of my office hours. What should students expect of fellow students? There's going to be a lot of teamwork. So in the teamwork, I think the main thing you should expect is that you try to communicate with each other and every student is trying the best they can. But also allow for the fact that you might be in a team of 3 or 4 students and one student might be doing that well, but there can be some good reasons why they're not doing that well. Maybe there's a lot of things happening. So try to be patient with each other as well. It might be a bit gutting for you in that maybe, okay, we've 3 members of our team, one of our team hasn't been posting for the last 2 weeks. I'm going to lose the election because of this, but it's not going to impact on your own marks. So you'll still get the same marks anyway. You mightn't have the glory of an election win, but you're not going to lose out marks wise if one member of your team or a few members of your party aren't, in your opinion, pulling their weight. Also, try to support each other. Like, if someone's struggling with the posts and you're doing well in the posts, try to give them a few pointers. They can talk with me, of course, but you might have some good ideas. Say, look, why don't you do this? Or, look, we're coming up now. We've got Leash and Longford coming up. Why don't you're from Longford, why don't you focus on Longford? Why don't you use your local information, generate a few posts around that will support our campaign? Last point is just to remind you that what we're seeing in the last few years is a lot of really big elections. So presidential elections in America, general elections in Germany and the United Kingdom, European elections took place a few years ago. We've had a number of local elections in the Republic of Ireland in the last year. We had the presidential election last year. There was a general election in November of the previous year and local elections in June of the previous year. So a lot of elections have taken place. So there's a lot of up-to-date examples of elections to look at, and you can draw these examples of these into the module. If you can draw some good examples of these into your exam answer in May, brilliant. Boundary changes. We had recent boundary changes, election boundary changes in the Republic of Ireland in 2023. There's boundary changes also in America. There was a new phase of boundary changes in 2021 after the 2020 census in USA, but all of a sudden, in the last few months, they decided to start redrawing election boundaries in the USA. And that's quite controversial. So if you can, keep an eye on what's happening in the USA in terms of gerrymandering.